like when I say like we recorded everything just to record everything, it's like there's still intention behind it. So as being an editor, I was like, I knew to start every time I hit record, I knew what I was going to sort of get or what I wanted or had an idea of like how can I use this later on. But it was also not just recording everything. So there is an intent from the experimentation. I love that. Again, I got to have fun.
Welcome to the Styleframe Saturdays podcast, the podcast dedicated to ideation, visual storytelling, and concept development as it pertains to an animated production. We'll be breaking down the brief of our guests' favorite style frames, and we'll also get a glimpse into the inspiration and workflows behind their frame of choice as well. That was Sean Foster, a cinematographer based in Fort Worth, Texas. His visual aesthetic is rooted in everyday life experiences and captures the energy and emotion of candid moments. And today he's joining us on the show to share with us his creative approach to telling a great visual story. So let's dive in. Hey, Sean, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. How are you? How's everything going?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. No, well, and it's my pleasure too. I appreciate you being here. Well, you and I go way back. We were just talking about that a little briefly before we hopped on to record today. But, for anyone who doesn't know, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into video production, cinematography, your whole world of, just video in general?
Just that. Yeah. It's, I've been doing it since I got out of college. I was one of those late bloomers out of college. Everybody had a 4-year goal to get out. It took me 7 years because I went into school and I was doing business and I hated it. And I was like, I need to get out of this world. So I quit school for a little bit. And my uncle, he was an editor at New York One. And he's like, hey, let's just do nepotism. You know what I mean? Let me get you a job out here, nephew. You can't just be a bum. And I was like, all right, cool. Let me go back. And I loved movies. I was just loved going to indie flicks. I used to go to Angelica all the time. And, I was like, let me try this world. It's like, I didn't want to do news, but he's like, here's a career path. Let's go down this route. Don't be, just figure yourself out. And went back to school for television, radio production. And because I didn't want to do film. And then I just, right after college, I got an internship at the mayor's office under Bloomberg's administration. And I was, that's how old I am. But under Bloomberg's administration. And just took my way up from there. Started just doing little city council meetings and touching the camera and just figuring out, where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. Just figuring it out. I went from there. Started doing some like small little films and stuff, indie films and stuff like that with friends, and just get my chops up. And then I went to the Blaze, and then just started just camera work and just meeting people and opening my horizons. Started doing did the World Series, did Monday Night Football, stuff like that. So it's just a big world of content and footage and just recording stuff, filming stuff, and as well as editing as well, so it's just I'm all over the place.
I was going to say, yeah, like having worked with you and, being a former colleague, I know that you touch every aspect of production. So I don't even think I realized that, like, even prior to the Blaze where we both worked together, that, you were at New York One and really kind of doing like, camera operation type stuff. Because I've seen you do color grading, audio, editing, cinematography, you name it. So it's cool to hear that, you've kind of been, doing all aspects of production for a long time now. Yeah. And, still doing all of it.
still trying. I mean, it's just, you got to just go where the money goes in a sense and figure, just still try to increase your skills, So I just like this weekend, I just did live golf and I wanted to get into that world to get on their roster. And so I was like, hey, you could be a Parab sound. I was like, listen, I'm not a sound guy. Like I can do sound in post-production, but I don't know sound. Like I could mic somebody up on a set, but I'm not a sound person. Like I'll never sell myself as a sound person. I don't hear what sound people hear. You know what I mean? And it's just one of the things where it's like, all right, let me just do Parab sound. And I did that. And it was a paycheck, but it's also, let me get my foot in the door with live golf. And let me start making those connections. So it's just constantly trying to just increase your skills and, get more work at the end of the day.
Oh, for sure. Well, and having been someone who's kind of been on set, kind of live in the studio and even just out on like, shoots in general, and then also sort of like being behind the computer and, doing the editing and all those other sort of fine tuning aspects, like if you had to choose, like, do you have an area that you prefer in terms of the whole sort of like film and video world?
Oh, I'd rather film. I'd rather be a cinematographer. Like I'd rather shoot. Like I love interviews. I love doc style shoots. It's just, I was working on stuff with the marketing company, and we did, a lot of a lot of interviews, a lot of B-roll, just telling the story from just the lens. And I love that
Mhm.
aspect of it, where you turn on to something, you don't know what you're about to watch, and you see how that person got to that story point, and visually. A lot of the projects I try to do, like a lot of projects I shoot, I also try to edit, so you can see that whole world come together, and then you can kind of take a look into my eyes in the sense of like, wait, where did he get that from? Where did he come from with that? So
Yeah. No, I love that. Oh, I love that you just talked about sort of like capturing it through the lens too. Cause I feel like I've seen you say, and I've heard you say, there's like everybody's always got a story to tell. And I know even on your website, you kind of point that like, like you're trying to sort of capture those everyday sort of life moments. So hearing you actually say it again, it kind of really resonates with the work that I've been a part of as like a fellow team member and then other work that I've seen you do. So yeah,
yeah,
no, that's really cool to hear.
yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Well, so ordinarily on the show, we talk about our guests' favorite style frames, which are, these design frames in the pre-production phase of like motion design, animation, or illustrative or just pure design projects.
Hmm.
And that's where sort of the visual style sort of develops from. And what I'd love to do today is sort of apply that same premise to our discussion, but of course centered around, what we were just talking about in your world of cinematography, video production, and you name it.
Yep.
So with that said, I'd love to talk about the production still or frame that you're choosing to share with us today. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So I had the chance of working with a comedian who went on tour, and we came up with the concept of how to document his story. To just follow him around on the road, follow him at home, and just taking a concept of what he does as a personality and showing it to the world. And the frame that I picked out was we were at a country artist's house. It's not even a house, a mansion, and we did. There was this, but three guys that's sitting around drinking whiskey and smoking cigars and just having a conversation. And it was a 3 camera interview. And at one point, we just pretty much let them talk. There was a direction we wanted to go in, and obviously, when guys are drinking, smoking, and having just shooting the shit, it's gonna go a little bit off topic. You know what I mean? So it was just pretty much just put the cameras down, find a good spot for the cameras, but also just let them go, and just make those quick adjustments while the conversation is happening. And I think the friend that I got is they're just again smoking a cigar, and there's a lot of action happening in the screen, and it's like I told the other camera out, like, pull the camera out wide, shoulder over the shoulder, just get, show the world that we're in right now. Just so you just don't see one person versus another person, like just straight cuts to 3 different people, like show that world. And it was just like, after I think we were filming for like 2-3 hours. Like, again, we were there, like we were flies on the wall. Like, it was like, hey, how much are you guys going to drink? How much are you guys going to smoke? When are we going to start recording? And when is it just going to be just a bunch of dudes babbling? So yeah, that frame, the frame of them just smoking a cigar, just laughing, having a good time is just one of those things where it's like, again, just pulling out the lens and showing people where we are in that scene. You know what I mean? In the sense of the conversation, like, okay, this is weird that this is happening. These guys is having a bunch of guys is having a good time.
Yeah.
Like you watch a lot of different things in our content. It's like literally just straight cuts to like types of people's faces on podcasts or like we are. You don't
Right.
see the bigger space and the conversation that's happening. So it's like, okay, we're gonna shoot like almost like a podcast interview kind of thing, but let everybody just talk.
Okay. Yeah. So I was going back, I was thinking a little bit and I was like, okay, I didn't realize that this was just like a solo interview. But now that I mean, there's that sort of like title card at the end. So was it a one off thing or was this like a series that you and Chad did together or?
It was a series. He
Okay.
had a show, and it was called. We came up with the name "Humor Me," and it was just like just pretty. Again, it was just him on tour. He does a lot of different kinds. So it's like sort of like a variety show, like skits and
I
interviews
see.
and behind the scenes stuff. And
Okay.
and that whole open was just the idea of like, how can what's the show title gonna be? And it was just
Hmm.
me sitting at home one night, and I was like, okay, we came up with the name Humor Me because it's like he's a comedian and he also has political views, and people might not agree with it. So the whole idea of like humor me, let me tell you something and let me humor you or humor me. So it was just one of those
Yeah.
conversations. And then I was at home one night just trying to come up with an open and a style of what how to represent him, like being on the road, just him having conversations, him talking, just him being on stage. And that was just how I kind of mashed that whole world together. Just sitting here and it's like, okay, he always values like old American values and stuff like that. So that's why I went to like the black and white cinematography, the black and white people, the footage as well to show people laughing in theaters. And I kind of jumped to that position with him and his wife on the couch. So it was just a lot of, trying to put this story, like trying to tell this weird story. It was weird. I was literally at home, just my mind is like trying to figure out where to go on this open. I was like, I don't know what to do. Sitting here, like pressure was coming on. I was like, hey, the show's about to air in a week. We need something, dude. You can't just have a flat title card. And I was just me sitting at home, just drinking, just relaxing, and trying to come up with this creative juices start flowing. And all right, I started just downloaded like railroad tracks and car scene of him in the car with his friends driving to where we're going on location. It was pretty much that was his life. His life was one weekend he's home with his wife on the couch watching a movie. Next weekend he's on the road with his tour manager. Next weekend he's on an interview. Next weekend he's on stage. And it's just like, how do you show that world of a guy that's traveling and just being him? And that was how the open came together.
I love it. And I love that you were actually part of the sort of like creative process of figuring out like what the show name was going to be, what the title card was going to look like and everything. So that's really cool to hear too. And you can see it in the in the whole video and in these series of sort of like stills that we're going to like, even go into more detail in as well. Yeah. So I can kind of see now the sort of full picture aspect of it, like knowing that, yes, it was a series, but like really we're just sort of following him around, the comedy that he does, the interviews that he's having, the conversations that he's having. It really sounds like what you were trying to do with your team was really sort of capture Chad as who he is, but the conversations he's having with others as well. And I think that that's, a really important thing in this day and age as well too, like just capturing people sort of, being in the moment and conversing with one another and, sharing views and opinions, whether they're similar or different. Yep. It's refreshing. And so, I'm glad that you chose this project to share because, I don't think I even realized that like that this what this show was all about.
Yeah. It was a short-lived show. But in the process of, just being like the director, producer, shooter, editor kind of thing, it was fun. It was like, again, trying to tell a story of somebody from a different aspect. And, it was on a network where, again, to me, everything looked the same. And sometimes you got to figure out how to break that up, how to break that story up. And then, having examples of like, what Anthony Bourdain did, like, part of, just different shows, different things to show that, okay, we can have certain content on different networks and different platforms and still tell a fun story. What I mean? Some people might not like his political views, but if you sat down and watched the show, he just listens to conversation. He spoke to people that didn't believe his political views, and just again, just being human. My whole aspect, the whole thing was just being human and telling that like, we are all human. And if you see the conversation, like just a bunch of guys sitting down having a conversation, and again, that's just that little 30-second intro is only part of a 4-hour interview watching guys talk. So it's just a lot to grab from that.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back a little bit. You had said, you felt, at a network at the time where everything sort of looked and sounded or felt the same. You were sort of sitting there thinking like, oh, how can we make this feel different? I mean, like sort of walk me through like what your sort of like creative thinking process was behind that. Like, how did you figure out a way to make it feel different while also being cohesive with the rest of sort of the network sort of styles and visuals and so on and so forth?
Yeah, it was one of those shows because we knew he was going to have a podcast, and we sat around and it's like, okay, we want to follow this guy. Like, how can we follow him and tell a story? So it's just, again, my idea of like doing a show was you're gonna get tired of just watching a camera just follow a person around. So each episode we had a monologue and we kind of had a conversation of where we want to go, and then from that point on, we said, okay, what guests are we talking to? And how can we have a conversation from that? Or sometimes we just interviewed a guest, and then from that we build an episode around that guest conversation. So it was just how can we look different from a talking pundit at the end of the day? You know what I mean? Like, how can we have this guy still have his political views, but also humanize him and show him in a way that, and then have the skits and have him have his skits be his creative part. So we just let him run wherever he wanted to run with the skits. If he wanted to do a skit about something random as heck, we'd let him go on it, and then from there I'd have to come back in the post house and like, okay, and post house is my living room. It's like, how do I build out this episode? You know what I mean? Like, how can we make this all blend together so it doesn't just look like a variety show of just random? Like, it's not. I don't want it to look like an SNL skit, but I wanted it to still tell a story at the same time. Just somehow weave a whole episode together. So that part, after that part, pretty much I would help him like, hey, can you build a monologue around this topic? We spoke about this.
Oh, very cool.
Can you talk about this? Can you talk about this and then go from there? Or, this, build talk from around this conversation, or so we don't have to, like, I didn't want I wanted each in a way to feel separate. So it's like, hey, talk about your guests. Like the guests would just pop on, but again, talk about the monologue and let's bring that together. So everything would look cohesive and feel cohesive.
Wow. Yeah. So it sounds like you had like a plethora of different roles on this project with Chad too. I mean, like you say producer, I feel like really you're kind of like being like the director
Yeah,
of everything. You're directing him to have like certain conversations or say like, hey, like talk about this a little bit more. And it makes sense, like, and this is why I wanted to have you on the show too, because I think that that's what's so interesting about sort of like the live production world is that you're really sort of embedding yourself into the storytelling aspect of the projects that you're working on too. Not to say that, designers, animators, and motion designers don't. We do. We definitely have that element of creative thinking that we have to do for our own projects as well. But to be there sort of directing and, like you said, humanizing sort of like the project that you're then going to take the bits and pieces to form the, cohesive edited version of it, I think it's just really cool to hear that, like, you're sort of like, yeah, well, I was the producer, I was the DP, I did this. And it's sort of like, no, like you did the directing, the full package deal of pulling the whole thing together.
And then again, it was a small crew. It was literally a crew of two of us.
Right.
And then, Chad and his road managers. And, everybody wants to keep everything on a tight budget. Yes, you can go out and, you could go out and get a producer, a line producer, a script producer, this storyteller, 3 cams, 4 cameras, audio people, PAs, runners, and all of that. And, again, I would love it if I had a budget to do that. That would be great, because that would have been a lot of pressure off of my head in the sense of like, let me be a little bit more creative, because you're trying to do, again, too many things. But it was also like, how can we, again, this is your job, tell a story, make it work. And, we have to produce a show every week. So it's like, where are we going this week? Who are we talking to this week? Can we do a skit? And, after a certain point, it got bad, because it was just like, now I'm not coming up with ideas. Now I'm not really thinking about, now we're just trying to just throw stuff at it. You know what I mean? And that's where it kind of got rough and sketch. So, but again, being that's part of like, okay, let's direct, let's produce. Hey, can you do this for me real quick? I need this to make this episode flow. If it doesn't, it's going to suck. You know what I mean? And that's what I thought about the whole time. Like, I just knew when I had to go back to edit, if I didn't have the parts I needed, then how am I going to make this episode flow?
Sure.
And I had to be, hit a 22-minute timeline.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like the premise of the whole project was to just sort of like kind of show a day in the life of, and again, these conversations that Chad's having with people. But aside from that, were there like, maybe even from his studio manager, was there any request as to sort of like, like how they wanted to see things pulled together, or the sort of approach that they had? Was there any creative brief other than just sort of you going with the flow of like, we're going to tell this guy's sort of story, we're going to humanize him a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he knew the topics that, again, his monologues he knew what he wanted to do. I was very hands off on his monologue. Again, he's a orator, he's a comedian, he does what he wants to do. So in that part, I stood away. Like, I was like, hey, this is where I want you to go. You do your thing. I never corrected that part, because again, that's his thoughts, his beliefs, his views. So I just let him do his thing. So when that's the part where it's like, okay, I trust you. I believe that you know what you're doing on that part. So you could go ahead and touch that part. I'm going to back away and leave that alone. So that's the only part that they were like, hey, but once he gave me what I needed, they only saw the episode once I said, hey, here's the episode, this is what it's going to look like. And then it aired, There's never any corrections or anything. Somebody said, hey, can you take that down? Or we didn't like that, whatever. It's just like, hey, this is a show, put together and put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So complete creative freedom, really, from your perspective. Oh,
and I love
cool.
that part. I love that part.
And that's great to hear, because again, you're this 2-man band really on this project. And so you're doing all sorts of different types of roles. And, when you're in sort of that position, I guess you could go one of two ways. I agree with you in that, like, I love it, because then you're sort of like, okay, I can have like a little bit more control over like, where the visual direction, creative direction is going to go.
Yeah.
Obviously when there's more cooks in the kitchens, there's just more constraints around the project, and that can be good or bad too. But I agree with you in that sense as well. Like, when someone's like, give us what you think is, the best visual direction to take. It's like, you're like a kid in a candy shop at that point.
I mean, that's what it was. I mean, if you I have so many different things where it's like we would change the look of his monologues. Like one point it went from, just wherever back, like if we were in a theater, we had some great theaters where we had this like just some beautiful backdrops and just old school theaters with great old school lights and just tungsten lights and just blasting. And I would put him on a frame, and then I would have literally just a row of lights behind him, and just like just complete blurred out. Shot everything very shallow, so it was just like, okay, can I do this? Yes, I'm going to do this. Why not? Because I have nobody to tell me what to do. We did some interviews sometimes in the audience seats, and it was like, all right, we're gonna just pull a super wide camera lens and just have it just shooting both of them, but then we have still the crosses on both, and just visually just having like again like a candy, like a kid in a candy shop, like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
good times.
Talk to me a little bit more about like, the lighting and sort of like the lenses you choose to use too. I mean, like, obviously in this piece there's a variety of, lighting setups and, different lenses that you obviously use to capture the different moments of Chad. But, typically speaking, when you're sort of like live shooting, directing, like what's guiding your decisions around which lenses to use and how to sort of like, I guess, pick the right lighting or choose the right lighting for the subject?
Yeah. And again, that's it's just in the moment. I was like, again, what do I want to do with today? Like, how do I want this to look today? It was literally it was insane. This stuff, like, in the frame that's like the 2-second frame. There's it's him walking in the back of his head in a marquee, and it was like, okay, let's bring the camera outside. We were shooting on, again, small cameras, just so we could be very mobile. And again, we didn't have a PA or audio or camera or something like that. So it was like, okay, how can we move around? So every lens I had was like either a 1.4, a 1.8, or a 2.8. And
Hmm.
I got shot at that all the time. Like, it was like, we're going to show nothing in the background. Like, I wanted to look so smooth and milky, and it was just like, we're gonna do it. Like, oh well, you want to shoot 5.6? No, I want to shoot, like, I want to see his ear move, and I want to see the back of his head just be a blur. And it's like, why? It's like, because we can do that. Why not? And that's what it was. It was like, again, that frame where it's like, it was dark outside. It was like almost pitch black. It was right before his show. He's resting down. There's audience members outside. I was like, hey, I want to get a shot of you walking towards the marquee with with your hat, the cowboy hat, the look. Just, again, just thinking of like old westerns and thinking of different, just the idea of like what a cowboy in a sense looks like. So I was like, I want to get a shot, like a hero shot of you, but from the back, like you walking towards, your exit or your entrance kind of thing. And it was, I didn't want any lights. I didn't want to bring lights out and spot him and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, we're going to push the ISO, the gain really high, especially on these mirrorless cameras. We could do that. And then just walk. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm going to be right behind you. I want to see a frame of the hat. I want to see a little bit of detail so you can see the logo of his hat. And then you can see the marquee in front of him. And it was just like complete. All you saw was full circles and just a complete fall off. And I just love that. You couldn't even say his name on a marquee, but you could tell like it's this cowboy, this character, this big frame walking towards his destination kind of thing. And that was what it was. It's like, okay, let's have some fun. His monologues, it was like, all right, he's going to have a camera. He's going to be looking right at the camera because he's trying to talk to his audience. So that one was, 2.8 a little bit to 4.5. It's not, we didn't play with this straight on, but all the side shots were just, just very soft and out of focus frames. For lighting, it was we tried to do very minimal at first. So I would just have one key, maybe an edger, and then just use the background to help boost or turn down the framing as much as I can. And then from that point on, we went to, okay, he wanted his monologues to be more serious. So like, all right, how about this? How about we just go into a studio, complete blackout. He's gonna look like he's in a black hole, and we're just gonna light him from one side of the frame. And I just literally just had a key light, just literally one side. Um, Sometimes we had an edger. I had a little bit of a topper, and that was it. Like, okay, complete. Like, you don't know where he was. It was just all it was just a black abyss. And then again, the same thing. Like telling this cowboy look, just very harsh lighting, where you could see the edges of his face, the chisel, the silhouette of the cowboy hat. This. I don't know. Every time I think of like shooting somebody that's a cowboy, I just think of old westerns.
Right.
You think about how they were constantly looked as, in a sense, a hero and hero shots. And I was like, okay, how do I show that? I don't want it to look too soft where it's like I want to see, you want to see his jawline. I want to see the physique of a guy in a sense in that frame to this
Hmm.
audience. So that's how we came up with the line for that. But again, everything was always like a 1.4, 1.8 for shooting. I
Okay,
think,
cool.
yeah.
Was this frame of him sort of like walking towards the marquee like one of the first shots that you did, or was it sort of like in the middle of, you had some other stuff already sort of filmed?
Yeah, we had, and that's the thing. Like we had a couple of times right before the show aired. We went on the road for again 2-3 weeks. So we just started shooting stuff. We, in my head, I knew what I kind of stuff I wanted, what I wanted from him on stage.
Hmm.
But as we got to certain theaters, again, not every theater looks like that. Like a very classic theater. Like we have theaters now that just LED walls and just look very boring. There's no story behind the theater, and I just love, even now. Like I'm on a tour right now with a client, and I produce a show. And again, sometimes we go to casinos, and it's like this casino looks so bland, but an old school theater, I don't know, it's something that draws me to like old marquees. So with Chad, it was the same thing. It was just we just shot a lot of stuff, and it was just, what can we shoot? What can I get from him? Because I didn't know what the open was going to look like. Again, I was just like, I just want to shoot stuff. We just had a fun time just going around, just recording things, and then just throwing it into a SD drive and just banking it. And then, coming up again, I knew certain looks I wanted from him. I knew, okay, let's get you on stage. Let's get you off stage. Let's get you walking onto stage. Again, you look at the open, it's like we did a big show of him when we were in Texas, and that's why you had the sparks coming up of him walking on stage. I had a gimbal, so I followed him on stage with the smoke and everything. I was like, that, like I want that big presentation.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, it's funny hearing you talk about a lot of this because I feel like I hear similarities from some of the more sort of pure illustrative or design, people, guests that we've had on the show, where it sounds like you had an idea,
mhm,
obviously, of how you saw this going with Chad, because you said, I know certain things that I do want to get. But then it also sounds like the locations kind of, sort of inform some of the storytelling for the piece, and that really ultimately that you were just like experimenting a whole ton too, and even that
mhm,
experimentation kind of informed for some of the storytelling. And it just sort of seems like that's a reoccurring theme that I hear from people saying, whether it's video like you, or an illustrator, a painter, you name it, that like that experimentation phase is like just so crucial to like the whole storytelling aspect of any visual medium.
mhm, mhm. And again, like you're playing, you're experimenting, but then like because everything is like you're not just gonna, like when I say like we recorded everything just to record everything, it's like there's still intention behind it. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
for
Like I'm
sure.
not just gonna, I don't. First of all, I'm not gonna go home and edit and just look at all this footage, right? Because like the editor, you get pissed off where you're like, wait, why did I roll? Why did that cam person roll on that? Like that was a horrible shot to roll on. Like why is that in my footage? So as being an editor, I was like, also I'm not gonna go home and look at everything, like every look mistake, just to record because again, it has to have intention. Like I knew to start every time I hit record, I knew what I was going to sort of get or what I wanted, or had an idea of like how can I use this later on. But
Hmm.
it's also not just recording everything. So there is an intent from the experimentation. I love that. Again, if we had time to location scout and have a script supervisor, have a storyteller who we're going to go, then yeah, there'll be less experimenting. But again, that was a great part of the shows. Like I got to have fun. Like we
Right.
got, I think the cameras that we purchased, they literally came out a month or 2 months before. So we got it fresh off the line. Like we're like, here's brand new cameras. Why'd you pick those cameras? Because it was small and I'm going to experiment with it. I'm going to have fun and I'm going to use it. This is the price point. This is the lens I can get. I knew I wanted Canon lenses, and we did it. Again, experimentation is how you just get better and you just have fun.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, so even every aspect of this, even the equipment was sort of informing some of the storytelling options that you had at your disposal too. Oh, I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of storytelling, even just a little bit more too, I know that this was sort of like a relatively short duration that you had to get this show open done within. But typically speaking, when it comes to the storytelling aspect of your projects, like what does your process typically look like? Like, is there this big experimentation phase, or does it depend on whether or not, like, someone else is sort of doing the directing? Like, what does it look like for you?
I mean, it's weird. It all depends, right? So
Hmm.
if I have a director with me, that'd be great. Or somebody tell me, hey, this is where we want you to go. And sometimes, a lot of the work that I'm thankful for, a lot of it was just, hey, do do you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had a project a couple years ago where I had to edit a reality show for a travel network, and they reached out and got 4 editors, and they said, hey, we have this show. We're gonna give you guys 2 episodes each. Here's a talent. Here's the interview. Here's the guest. Here's the footage. We had no storyline with that. It's like, okay, make it an episode. You know what I mean? So it's like, what's the episode gonna look like? And it's like, hey, just just have a beginning, middle, and end, and fill it with footage. And that was like, okay, and again, that after like that part, that reality show was like, that was a whirlwind for me, in that world of like, okay, here's footage that I didn't get to work on at all. Like, I was literally just an editor. They had, here's a massive hard drive with all this footage. Here, make it work, kind of thing, and tell a story. And can you story tell? Yes. All right. So here it is. Here's the interviews. Here's a rock climbing guy, and here's him rock climbing with his guest, and the guy that's never really rock climbed. And here's a story. Make it work in this episode. And that was, I was, again, having free reign in a sense to some extent, but you also have to work in the constraints that you have of the footage, of the B-roll, of the conversation, and then it was like, okay, I don't know what happened in the conversation. I just got a file and I had to sit there and watch, hours and hours of interview footage. And it's like, okay, now break this down and tell a story from that point. So that, with that aspect, sorry about that. That's wild. I thought it was off. I thought it was muted. My bad. So with that storytelling part, it was my process of like, okay, let's line the footage up together. Let's break everything apart and just sit back and just watch. And I would spend a good, 2-3 hours, 4 hours sometimes, just watching the interview over and over again, and trying to, come out with a conversation and try to tell the story from the main conversation they had and make it work. It was a tough one, but that was like, it was good to sit. It was good to learn from that experience of like how I would handle the edit process a little different, how I would handle the storytelling, or how I would handle the B-roll. I learned a lot from that project. The episode came out great in my eyes, and I think they liked it too. It was just, again, because you got to tell a story with 3 other editors that are doing 3 other edits. So you got to, like, how's that all going to be a storyteller? How's that all going to tell the same story in a sense? And that's when, as a editor, storyteller, you have to figure out, okay, you can't go off the beaten path, right? Because it's going to make the episode look weird. Like, you're going to have the episode that looks like, why does that episode look like that when all other episodes look like this? So it was like, you had to constrain in that world of making it, making it work to tell a story, but you still have to follow, in a sense, a guide from everybody else's episode. So the process of that was just literally just sitting here thinking. I would put on Lo-Fi Girl. Lo-Fi Girl legit makes me just go in a world where I don't know why Lo-Fi Girl does it, but I zone out in that world. I can't listen to music with words, really. I can't listen to, like, hip hop or whatever, country, whatever genre I want to listen to. I can't do it, but like lo-fi and a candle, like you see the candle behind me right now, like, just something about it just makes me just vibe out. And Lo-Fi Girl, just let it sit down. And even the process of like trying to find the right music, even that. So having Lo-Fi Girl, but then pausing it and like, all right, trying to find a soundtrack for each scene or each commercial break or something like that was just, what I did. And this music just kind of helped me go along with the flow of it.
Yeah. No, it's so funny you're talking about Lo-Fi Girl, because I listen to Chill Hop while I'm working too. So it's the same thing. I'm like, I don't have the candle though, so maybe I need to incorporate the candle into my office now.
I don't know. I'm a scent person, so I need candles. If it's not a candle, it's incense. If it's not that, it's essential oils. Like that whole, it's just the room has to just be chill and vibe out and relax. And that's how I get to my like planning, in the sense,
But it's so interesting that you're saying that though. You're having like every sensory experience sort of affected as you're sort of getting ready to do the work. Like, is that coincidental? Like, is that
it's the ADHD in my world. It's my brain. My brain is chaotic. And I think, but it's I don't know. I think that's how it legit. Sometimes that's how it makes me. That's how I get in my creative zone. I think I can't.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it sounds like that. I mean, you think about it like a medium like video. It's got everything. Like, yes, you can't exactly smell something, but like you could totally make someone smell something from a video.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's so funny that you say that.
Yeah, it's my brain. My brain is insane. So, I mean, I don't know. It's wild sometimes.
Well, I know we spoke about the style of this, this piece a little bit, and the 3 frames that we've been focusing around to, kind of like Chad sort of like being in his element and everything as well. I know that the timeline was pretty short. and that, you know, you kind of were running with the idea of like just showing him in his element. But I'm just curious, you know, other than that, were there any other styles that like you were thinking of possibly exploring, or was this sort of like just like, oh, this idea works and we're just going to run with it?
Um, was there any styles? No, it's just I think once I got in the idea, like I knew the idea of what the show was, like to humor me, the open it's about him, right? So it's like it's about him and his audience and people, you know, to go viral, to be on television, people know your face. You know, you're not it's not radio. He you know, he went viral for being a guy in his truck. So that's why there's always an element of him in his truck with his road manager or just frames of him in his truck or him on the road. And once I knew where we were going with the show and what we wanted to tell as a story, those frames were just like, okay, it's gonna be a representation of his world, of that world's for him. And I think this once I got there, it's like, okay, I knew where I wanted. I knew that was the area I want to be in. Now it's like, okay, trying to tell that story trying to tell the intro in a fun way and keep people, you know, zoned in.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I could just put up a place card and say, you know, Family Matters and shots of him. You know what I mean? I could have
Right.
done that real
Right.
simple and stuff like that. But I wanted it to catch your eyes again from everything else from what the network had
Right.
in the sense of, you know, yeah, there's always great animated intros and stuff like that and big scenes and blah blah blah. But like I wanted to show you like, you know, a travel show in a sense, but from his perspective,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
that makes sense. Well, and I should have asked this before I asked that question, but like, you know, we were just talking about sort of like the whole auditory aspect of projects and getting ready to work on projects and stuff. But, you know, even approaching the audio element of this too, I mean, like, you know, what informed those decisions for you guys?
Ooh, the intro song. Even the intro. I mean, that's just a stock. It's a stock track, and that was, you know, sitting at home. I don't know, like I don't. And if you follow me on social media, you know, like if I'm trying to find a song for any project, it takes me forever.
I think it takes
To
everybody forever.
it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, like especially with like stock sounds. Like yeah, if I could find a country song that I had a license to, I could probably pick a track out real fast. You know what I mean? But it was sitting at home again for this project, sitting at home is like applying stock images over and over and going to different sites and like what can, you know, I don't want to go too country because then it's not fun, but I also want like I need something that's, and it's funny because I found that track and it's wild when you hear it, like you find a song or a stock song and you hear it on like on a national commercial, because I've heard the song that we used for Chad in the national commercial and I was like, wait a second, what is that? And I heard it pop and I was like, like to me that's like it caught my attention. Like, wait, that's awesome. That, you know, obviously another creative person in that creative space on a bigger national scale found the same track that I found, sampled it, and used it, got the license. It's like, all right, here's a national commercial. Here I'm doing it on a small scale production. But again, it was just like sitting at home and just going over different songs and different tracks and different beats and trying to figure out how can, you know, what can we do to tell this and keep people engaged. You know what I mean? Like keep
Right.
people from the beginning. If you catch somebody in the beginning, that's what's going to keep them around for a little bit.
Right.
And even with that, like we used for chat show, I liked the idea of cold opens. I like the idea of just going into going into something right off the top and then cutting from that going into the track. So if I have a hard or a heavy cold open where the topic is going to be dark and, you know, or bring you down or kind of like keep you locked in or serious, the next frame that you get from after the outro of that cold open is going to be something that's going to hook you. And that's why I needed that beat where I needed the sound like clapping that gets you right off the bat, because again, I don't know what the cold open was going to be every week, but I needed something that's going to hook you right after that cold open.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, and I feel like you see a lot of I feel like you see a lot of people doing that nowadays too, because I don't know, there's just something about like being conversational, but then sort of like, yeah, using an auditory or visual hook to kind of, you know, bring you to the next scene type of thing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I don't, it's like again, you watch even shows just have it like a show will start and you don't know when. Like I just love shows where you don't know when the cold open is going to hit. You don't know when the show title is going to hit. You know, Ozarks did it really great, where it's like a scene would happen and then all of a sudden it goes boom, and it's like, all right, there's a title card. You know, and I love that. To me, that's always it keeps as a viewer, it keeps me like engaged. Like, okay, what's happening next? Keeps you drawn in. So again, with the cold open with Chad, it was like the same thing. Like he could be talking and then we'd just boom, end it and cut. And he's like, okay, here's it. Like here's the title card, and that to me, again, a way of keeping the audience engaged and hooked.
Yeah, for sure. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, we've spoken a ton about like kind of like your whole approach to this project, sort of the ideation and sort of like concept and story behind it and everything. Now having a chance to kind of like look back on it, everything that we've talked about, what would you say were the biggest challenges and rewards about working on this project?
Challenges, having only two people. It's one of those things where it's like, when you don't work on, like when you go to a project, you have like every position filled. You know what I mean? You're like, oh wow, this flows so great. But then the reward on top of that is like when you have little people, you have little people who tell you what to do. The freedom that you have, and that reward to me was great. Was looking back and like I got to do whatever I wanted to do with this show in a sense. It was we were like we were creative, we were having fun. We got to travel the world, the country, and the reward was like, okay, we got to do whatever we wanted. And it was just my mind figuring out how to tell a story through a show, and that was, again, to me, everything is always about growth and learning. The more you learn, the more you do, and repetitiveness, and having the freedom to experiment, and also tell a story and see, go back and look at the episodes and say, wait, why didn't this work, or what would you have done differently, is constantly my reward. Like I'll go back and I'll watch the episode, or sometimes I even look at the open and like, how would I have done that differently? Would I have done the effects more simpler? Would I have, you know what I mean? Like always constantly trying to figure out how to make, the reward to me is always like how to get better, or how to do this not better but differently as well. And again, the challenge is not having a lot of bodies to help you with the projects. Working on bigger shows, you see when everything is cohesive and you could focus on one thing, and you can focus on that skill set, how everything else would look better too. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we rush certain things because we didn't have the time or the constraints. So you could see, oh wow, that line looks a little off in that spot, or I would have lit this differently, or if I was in rush trying to mic this person, the mic was in the wrong spot. You know what I mean? So it's just that was where the bad and the good happened. But the reward was always to me having fun. I mean, that to me that was the best reward, having fun and making content. Like I just love creating.
Yeah, that's got to be. I mean, I feel like a lot of people would say the same thing, that like the biggest reward about any project is just that like you've learned something and you had a good time
Mm-hmm.
creating it while you were doing it too. So couldn't agree
Mm-hmm.
more on that. Well, and then this might be maybe a similar question, but I always want to ask it anyway. Like what about this project? These frames, make this your favorite project or your favorite sort of like production frames.
Um, it's what I guess it's the idea of, to me it's seeing, just being a fly on the wall. Everybody wants to always be a fly on the wall in certain situations. It's like, tell me, I wish I was a fly on the wall in that situation or that conversation. You know what I mean? Like I wish I was there. And that frame again, the big frame of the whole scene, like the guy's house. Like we're in his mansion, and he had a party the night before, and there's this chaos all around the scene. Certain things are in the right place. Like, oh, we had a photo shoot here the other day, and so you can see the umbrella in the background, and you just know there's chaos happening, and just that frame is just like there's a lot embodied in that frame, and then the frame of him on stage or the frame of him in the marquee. It's just throwbacks to just again styles, things that I've seen visually throughout the years of growing up watching TV and this content. Just how do you use a camera to tell a story and show, like how can you manipulate the camera to tell the story of like this cowboy, in a sense a hero, from that storytelling point of view, from that aspect, to me is what those frames represent for me, or like why I like those frames so much.
I love it. And again, I think it goes to, again, things that I sort of attribute to you, having worked with you, been a colleague and a friend of yours for a few years now, that like, you're always looking uh, for the appropriate lens to tell the story through. And again, I, always say that like, I always know that Sean always repeats like, like everybody's got a story to tell.
Yeah,
And it's even more clear that like there's an appropriate lens to tell those stories through, and so I think that captures that perfectly.
appreciate that. 100%. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's just this is how I think, man. Everybody has like legit, that's my, like I know it's a Biggie verse and stuff like that, like I know it's going back to hip-hop, but everybody has a story to tell, and I think just how to represent that story. Like I could have went out there and shot the back of his head from a distance. You know what I mean? But I was like, I want to be right behind you. I want to be walking with you. I want to see a lot of action. And again, it's just thinking on the fly sometimes, but also knowing how to know what you want right away. Like, okay, what are you gonna do? You want this on a tripod? You want this long lens of me walking away? Like, no, I want to be on you. I want to see the movement. I want to see my step with your step, the cohesiveness, and it's, again, just telling that weird story.
Oh, I love that though. I mean, oh my God, that's going to be like another favorite Sean quote of mine for like years to come now. Well, I mean, this has been like such a pleasure, Sean. I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on the show, share, your expertise, your stories, this project with us. It's just been such a treat. And, again, getting just like a bird's eye view into your world has just been awesome. And I really do think that our audience is really going to enjoy sort of seeing, your approach to how you approach creative work and a visual medium like video as well. So, thank you again. This has this has been awesome. If people want to connect with you to learn more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can follow my Instagram. My Instagram is just chaotic. I'm just chaos. It's just what it is. Thank you for having me on. It's just my social media. I'm on Instagram a lot. I don't post photos anymore. I used to post a lot of my pictures that I took. But I just started just doing Insta stories and just following a day in the life of me. So I'm on Sean Rhines 1 on Instagram, and then my reel is SeanFoster.work. And that's my reel. But honestly, it's just wherever I'm going on Instagram, it's just, you could see it. Like, you can see I'm working a live golf tournament. You can see I'm on the road. I'm on a plane stuck stranded somewhere, or this is a theater I'm working in today, and it's just. Again, that's my storytelling now. Is like, for me, like, I'm tired of, like, I don't post pictures anymore. I don't show a lot of work in a sense. I show behind the scenes work, and I like that. I like showing people that aspect. Okay, where's the project? Like, you can follow the project around if you want to see where it is somewhere out there, but you're gonna see me from my BTS and see where I'm working and what I'm doing with it.
No, for sure. BTS and taking us along for the ride is the great way to describe it. But let's just hope that, in the foreseeable future, you're not stuck at Newark Airport for 24 hours ever again.
Oh, I'm done with planes, man. I'm just so done with flying. It's, people think traveling is fun. It's not. Stay home. Don't go anywhere. Travel is not fun. I'm legit broken inside from airplanes. Like, if I like, it just. I've had some hard, I've had some hard stories from, I don't know. We'll talk. That's another time. That's another podcast.
Yeah, let's do
Don't travel.
Sean's horror stories of traveling podcast. We'll make sure that we put that together.
It'd be called Don't Travel is my podcast.
With Sean Foster.
Yeah. Where you going this way? Nowhere. I'm staying in my living room with my candle and lo-fi girl. Leave me alone.
Oh my God. Yes, that podcast will be coming out shortly. We'll make sure that we get that into production ASAP. Again, this has been awesome, Sean. We'll be sure to make sure. Whoa, gosh, I can't even talk. We'll be sure to share your information and links to like all the tools and resources that we mentioned here for our audience to check out. But awesome. That wraps it up for today, everyone. Feel free to email us at styleframesatpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, if you like what you see and hear here, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platforms as well. And lastly, come connect with us on social. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Sean, for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.